following program contains inconvenient truth and controversial topics that may be offensive to some audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Radio from the heart of America now.
And now, the Commander-in-Chief is back. Freedom Friday with Carl Gallups, the Oval Office of Gulf Coast Talk Radio.
All right, folks, and it's so good to have you in the house. Listen, we're going to just jump right into this because we've got so much to cover. A lot of things happening, a lot of things popping. And let's first of all just stop and celebrate. Today is November the 13th, Friday. Well, of course, we're broadcasting live on this November the 13th, Friday. Yes, it's a Friday the 13th. Yes, it is. I know that. But that doesn't even bother me. I don't even give thought to that. It means nothing, a superstition. But it is the 13th of November, 2020, live stream on a Friday. Now, of course, the Sunday evening audience will join us on the 15th, that evening. And we'll broadcast on AM radio, we'll broadcast on FM radio, we'll broadcast on live stream again. It'll be in podcast. People all over the world will be listening to this, and all over our nation, all over the Gulf Coast. They will hear it again. People will hear it again on radio and other live streams. So we've got a big audience that way, and we've been doing this for decades, and we appreciate you. But right now, as this live show's going out, let us celebrate that it is November the 13th and Donald Trump is still the president. See, I celebrate that. And this is not over till it's over. And please hear me. I'm not trying to put lipstick on a pig. I don't know where this is going. I mean, the mainstream media is calling everything for Biden, and they're just going out of their minds berserk. But they would, wouldn't they? You've listened to this show long enough to know what's going on and why they want him out of there. In fact, you're going to hear more about it today. It goes all the way back to the Obama administration. It goes all the way back to the birth certificate investigation. Yes, it does. And I will prove it to you in just a moment. And then it comes right on up. That's what the Mueller investigation was about. That's what the impeachment was about. That's what the whole COVID lockdown was about. So we could get the mail-out ballots out, so we could swing this election. That's what the Dems were thinking and saying, so that we can make sure we get bad orange man out of there. All right. Well, we all know the story. You've heard it over and over from all the talking heads, and people are so disgruntled and confused. And I know some of you are listening because you are hoping that I'm going to give you a word of prophecy or a word of prognostication, or I've got some secret inside scoop and I can tell you exactly what's going to happen. I really don't have any of that. I mean, I know I'm not here to preach today, but I do have some biblical insight, I believe, and some biblical opinionating and speculating on what all of this is about in the deepest realm of what's happening. We know it's spiritual warfare, but I'm talking about as it relates to huge connections to prophecy. Maybe we can talk about that sometime today, but right now I want to get into this thing that you're hearing over and over and over. If you're new to this show, maybe the first time you're hearing it is in the media and all over social media, and it's been on Fox News. It's been on several other of the mainstream media, and that is you're hearing about the hammer, Dennis Montgomery, the hammer, Dennis Montgomery. You're hearing this over and over again by some not so credible sources and some fairly credible sources, and then some that I would consider to be extremely credible sources. Sidney Powell, for example, one of the main attorneys in charge of President Trump's, whole recount and appeals to the courts. And Sidney Powell, she was a former prosecutor, federal prosecutor, I do believe, celebrated prosecutor with all manner of wins under her belt before in federal court, and she's quite celebrated among her peers and in the legal field, and she's been all over talk television shows and radio shows for years, just talking about various legal aspects of what's happening in our world and in our nation. And now she's the head of Trump's legal team, or at least one of the heads if she's not the head, Sidney Powell. I listened to her on two different Fox interviews with two different hosts. I got the clips of them. I played them before a large group of audience not too long ago, just some days back. And So, I mean, it's out there. You can go to YouTube. You can watch them. And she talks about the hammer and Dennis Montgomery. Tom Fitton is the head of Judicial Watch. He's on that interview, and the host is just blown away by what Sidney Powell is talking about, the hammer and Montgomery. And she turns to Tom Fitton and she says, do you know anything about this? And he said, well, there's rumblings about it out there on the internet, but but then he kind of changes the subject, and and there's probably a really good reason for that. I'll speculate on that later. But the point I'm making is you're hearing this. Now, if you haven't been listening to this show, you would have to have been listening to this show for years. And if you have, you're already screaming at the radio right now. You're saying, I know what you're talking about. We heard this on Freedom Friday years ago. Yes, you did. Probably 5, 6, maybe 7 years ago. I don't know the exact time that Mike Zullo and I actually spoke of it. Now, Mike Zullo is the one that uncovered it. It all came to him, and he's the investigator. But I was the mouthpiece, the media outlet. You know all about that. I was made a special deputy for integrity's sake, and et cetera, et cetera. But we're the ones that broke this. Mike Zullo's the one that broke it to the world. And it might have been first on Freedom Friday. I don't know. I don't care who's first. I'm just using this as a point of reference. That's all I'm doing. I'm not trying to stick my chest out and say, we were first. We knew about this before anybody. Well, Mike Zullo and Sheriff Arpaio knew about it long before I did. So, but I mean, when we, Zullo and I, broke it on Freedom Friday and really got into the guts and depths of it, probably we were the first major media outlet, I mean real live radio, on a real live radio stations, to talk about this. And then, of course, Mike went on many other talk shows, and I did too, and sometimes the two of us together, and I had permission to do it by myself on his behalf on other times, and so we just told the world about it. And you know what? The world applauded us and thanked us. I'm pausing because that's a big sarcasm. No, we were lied about. We were lampooned. We were lambasted. We were trashed. We were cursed. We were called conspiracy fools and kooks and nuts and tinfoil hat wearing idiots. And Zullo was called all kinds of disparaging names and, and just trashing him, trying to delegitimize him. But we tried to warn the world. We tried to warn America that this stuff was underfoot, that these kinds of deep state, and this was back during the Obama administration, of course, these kinds of deep state tools, cyber spying, cyber espionage, cyber breaking and entering, to borrow an old cop term of mine. I don't know what they'd call it now, but cyber encroachment into systems, military systems, education systems, government websites, not websites, government systems, operating systems, and databases, and even electoral systems, election systems of various states. I'm going to play you a little clip here in a moment. Plus, I've played in the past, I'm going to play it again today, a little short clip of Dennis Montgomery himself being recorded by Mike Zullo years ago, and Mike Zullo asked him to say, he just asked him, said, well, Dennis, so you've got this software called the Hammer, which Dennis represented himself as being one of the inventors, designers, and or at least operator of it. Mike Zullo actually went to Washington, D.C. You'll hear him talk about this, spoke with some Department of Homeland Security, I think it was. He'll tell you. If I'm misspeaking now, you'll hear it in just a moment on this clip. 2 or 3 people that he knew that basically told him, yeah, he's the real deal. Now, I'm not here exalting Dennis Montgomery, and neither has Mike Zullo ever done that as some kind of genius, perfection, everything he speaks is truth, because there are questions about that by high-ranking people, including Mike Zullo and Sheriff Arpaio. Now, they spent so many months with him unraveling. And it wasn't just about the birth certificate. That was kind of an auxiliary thing that came when Dennis Montgomery came to them as a whistleblower. But they started the investigation because apparently this software was being used years ago to encroach into the personal records and files and bank records and everything else of high-powered people, as well as, I think it was tens of thousands, maybe several hundreds of thousands of citizens in and around Arizona and Phoenix, and including Donald Trump way back then. I mean, all of this, we talked about all of this years ago right here on Freedom Friday. And so when we come back from the break, we're only going to be gone for 2 minutes. I'm going to start playing some of these clips and reminding you what was said, the danger we were trying to warn you about. Most of it, if you're still listening and you were listening back then I mean, you were right there with us. You got it. You understood. We weren't lying to you. I'm not going to lie to you. Mike Zullo wouldn't lie to you about this stuff. No. But we were in the Obama administration, guys. People got mad at Mike and Sheriff Arpaio. Why don't you do something with it? Well, what are you going to do with it? Okay, you got the information. Who are you going to take it to? James Comey, head of the FBI? Brennan, head of the CIA? Loretta Lynch, the DOJ, to Obama, to the Supreme Court, compromised, to Congress, compromised. Who are you going to take it to? Well, now here we are with a stolen election. And guess what might have been involved? The hammer. Stay with us.
You're listening to Freedom Friday with Carl Gallups from the Oval Office of the Gulf Coast.
Don't change that dial. We're just getting started. Freedom Friday with Carl Gallups, the Oval Office of Gulf Coast Talk Radio.
All right, folks, welcome back. Well, let me just dive into this so we've got the time for it. So we're hearing about the hammer and Dennis Montgomery. Well, I don't remember exactly what date it was, what year it was that Mike Zullo broke that discovery. Dennis Montgomery, CIA, FBI contractor, whistleblower, came to Arpaio about information he had about using this software that he was a part of. Mike Zullo went to Washington, talked to some people. He'll tell you who it was. I think it was DHS guys that he knew that said, yeah, he's a part of it. He sure is. And, so you knew all that if you listened to it. And so Mike came on the radio here and he and I several times talked about all of this, Montgomery, and he kept everybody up to date on it. And we were just, gobsmacked back then. I mean, to think that maybe our government was involved in elections with software. I mean, those are allegations. Even that Montgomery made. I don't know. I mean, I'm not sitting here swearing that's what happened. How do I know? I know what Montgomery said. In fact, it came up in court. You can go there on the internet. You can go to an article dated November the 13th, 2015, written by Jamie Ross, written by Courthouse News. It's out of Phoenix, Arizona. And that's back when Sheriff Arpaio was in his contempt trial. And Mike Zullo, you'll remember, was going through it all back then with him. And he actually had to go and testify. Let me just read 2 or 3 paragraphs that'll kind of put this in perspective for you so you'll know how far back this goes. So this article, I had to edit it because it's a long article, but just listen to these. All right. So Mike Zullo, a volunteer investigator in Arpaio's cold case posse. Well, that's how it started. But then he was then the lead investigator working directly under the authority of Sheriff Arpaio and didn't have cold case posse folks with him then being a part of it. It was Mike Zullo and Sheriff Arpaio is what it was. But anyway, volunteer investigator in Arpaio's cold case posse delivered an emotional description of his involvement in an investigation of U.S. District Judge Murray Snow. You remember him talking about that, folks, if you've been listening. It goes on to say he was overseeing the civil contempt hearing that Murray Snow was, in which Arpaio and 4 of his current and former aides are accused of violating a court order in a 2007 racial profiling case. Well, that was the cover for the whole thing against Arpaio, of which Donald Trump pardoned him. All right. They hate him for that too, by the way. All right. Here's the next paragraph. Then the investigation was sparked by information from Dennis Montgomery, a former CIA contractor. This is in the Phoenix News, folks. And it says, who told the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office that the federal government had illegally accessed the bank and IRS records of about 150,000 residents of Maricopa County. There you go. My estimates earlier were pretty close. Quote, Judge Snow was a victim on that database like I'm a victim, end quote, Zullo told plaintiff's attorney, the plaintiff's attorney, Stanley Young. And then it goes on to say, now Blixeth, and this is a long story. He was a billionaire developer. He got in some trouble with the law about some of his developing and finances, but he's tied to a lot of this too, and knows the sheriff well, et cetera, and he was involved in this and was quoted. So that's that name. But listen to this. Blixeth also described to Arpaio a secret computer system Montgomery told him about that was built by the federal government called the Hammer. He said the system is housed in Fort Washington, Maryland, and Montgomery used it when he was contracted by the CIA. Montgomery claimed the government asked him to hack into the Florida voter registration system. Folks, are you listening to this? Montgomery claimed the government asked him To hack in, now this would have been back in the days when Obama was running for office twice and there was a midterm election. You remember all of that. To hack into the Florida voter. You remember during those days when Florida was reporting they had several districts and several counties and several voting districts that had 100% vote for Obama. They'd never had that before. And some papers, some news outlets were saying no district in any state of the union had ever had 100%. Well, a lot of people assumed that's probably what it was. It was the hammer, probably. Now we're talking about the Dominion system and the hammer and all that. Well, here it is. So this all came up in federal court, and this article's recording it. The courthouse recorder, whatever it's called, it says, told him he was built by the federal government, called the hammer. He says, House Washington, contracted by the CIA. Montgomery claimed the government asked him to hack into the Florida voter registration system to upload information to alter it because there was, quote, a big redistricting down there in Florida, end quote. And they wanted to control the election with this equipment, this software. Mike Zullo and I have been reporting on this for years right here on Freedom Friday. We're going to play this first clip, and we'll play them all between now and in the next few moments. But the first clip is, I set it aside here. I had it in my hand. Here it is. Okay, here's the first clip. It's about a minute and a half, and it's just you're going to hear Mike Zullo. This was back in 2017, I think, when Mike Zullo was talking about this, and he's just recapping and rehashing what we had been talking about. And he's introducing Dennis Montgomery and how all of this came about. So play that clip.
Well, Carl, if your listeners remember, and for those that don't, you remember, I think it was back in 2013. You and I were on the radio. We were going to do another press conference, Sheriff Arpaio and I. And I think it was around January or February. And I got on the and I kind of announced that we weren't doing that press conference, that some new information had came in that we believed was earth-shattering and changed the course of this investigation, and simultaneously opened up another investigation conducted by the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office.
Yep.
Now that we're a year past Sheriff Arpaio being out of office, we have a lot of information here that we tried to bring forth to federal authorities, and nobody's doing anything with it.
Yeah, they weren't.
We were put in contact with a former CIA contractor by the name of Dennis Montgomery. Mr. Montgomery, it is verified that he did work on 2 separate occasions for a lengthy amount of time with 3-letter agencies that are, or have been and still are, conducting mass data collection on Americans, breaching computer software and computer programs and computers all across the globe, including the United States. And Mr. Montgomery alerted us to the fact that he was in possession of 151,000 identifications of residents of Maricopa County. So what happened there is that sparked an investigation being conducted by the Sheriff's Office into identity theft. And simultaneously, we were still conducting the birth certificate, fraudulent birth certificate investigation.
Right. Okay, so there's the introduction to it. Those of you that have been listening to the show, you'll remember that. Do we have a minute and 11 seconds to play this next clip? Peter, okay. All right, Peter, play this one. Now here, Mike Zullo is going to be talking about Montgomery and his connection to the hammer and the people that Mike Zullo went to see.
Now, you have to understand what Montgomery did. Montgomery built a computer system for the government known as the hammer, and that's documented in federal records. And he created the breaching software, the software that goes in and penetrates computers, defense systems, and takes it over as the administrator. Now, another group of individuals that I did track down, 3 of these individuals used to be full-time employees with the NSA. They built the mass harvesting software that collects all the data. So I have Montgomery who does the breaching, and the software from these other individuals collects the data.
And you spoke to those guys?
Oh, I spoke to them. I interviewed them. I saw them a couple of times. One of them is a good friend of mine now.
Yeah.
And we actually put Montgomery on the phone with them, and they conversed back and forth for about 45 minutes. And when we were done, I got back in touch with one of the gentlemen that was formerly with the NSA, and I asked him what he thought, and he said, Mike, he's the real deal. I'm talking to him about things that unless you were there, you would have no knowledge of.
NSA, not, it was NSA. I said Department of Homeland Security, but it was NSA. So there you have that. Now, listen, there's so much more. You can go to carlgallups.com/Freedom Friday, and it'll take you right to our main webpage. And there's a search engine there, and you can search, just put in Zullo, Mike Zullo, or, I think if you just do that. That particular interview was from December of 2017, and Mike's just recapping a bunch of things because he and I were then analyzing what had happened in the 2016 election, and so he was recapping for our audience about all that. But as you heard him say, in 2013 is when all of this broke. 2015 is when they were in court, and these clips were played outing Dennis Montgomery and the Hammer, and then, Mike Zullo and I were on here talking about it all the time. And Mike was just trashed, just called all kinds of filthy names by all kinds of operatives and nasty people. But he was right all along, and so were we. And you heard it first on Freedom Friday.
You're in the Oval Office of the Gulf Coast. Freedom Friday with Carl Gallups.
Welcome back to Freedom Friday with Carl Gallups, 1330 WEBY. Carl speaks with ontological certitude and theological indubitableness. For you liberals out there, this means that Carl knows who he is and that he is unashamed to be on a first-name basis with God. Now, here's Carl Gallups.
All right, folks. Well, now, see, this is why. First, let's bring Mike Shoesmith on. We're at the bottom of the first hour. Mike Shoesmith, are you there?
I'm here, sir.
Okay,
Thank you.
Good deal. Well, folks, listen, this is why you listen to Freedom Friday, right? For those of you that have been with us for years, this is the kind of stuff you've come to know and love and trust about us, is that we come to you with stuff that very few people dare to come. I mean, and Mike Zullo, bless his heart, and Sheriff Arpaio, they gave press conferences. And back in the day when we thought America was still America, they thought that the place would just be packed with mainstream media ready to hear about the birth certificate being an absolute fraud and all the criminal investigation evidence they had. And all they did was question Arpaio. What authority do you have to do this? You shouldn't be doing this. What authority? And who is Zullo? He's nobody. I mean, they just trashed everybody and lied about everybody. They were not. Remember how freaked out? I mean, I say freaked out that Arpaio and Zullo were. They weren't freaked out. They're men. But, I mean, they were like, what's going on? And
right.
Why, if it had been any time before that with any other president or big government official that a criminal investigation had been done and found out they had created false identity to basically seize the U.S. military and become the commander in chief, oh my gosh, that would have been the most earth-shattering news the planet had ever heard. But it was treated with contempt by the media. And so that's right. One of the ways that Mike Zullo and I got hooked up was that I was talking about it. And even before they were doing the criminal investigation, I was doing journalistic investigation, for whatever that's worth, for several years before, and was talking about it. So Mike came on the show one day and we started and we got to be friends. And it just, for several years, we were talking about it and everything that he would find out that he could reveal publicly. And he still knows and has documentation to a lot of stuff that he has never revealed and can't right now. And so, anyway, that's the whole backdrop to this. And I'm not playing a violin saying nobody believed us. But, you heard Mike Zullo say just a little while ago, he said, we had all this and we were trying to warn, but nobody in the government would do anything. Who are we going to take it to? Who are we going to take it to? And that's all I'm saying. And I'm just letting our listeners know that, look, this is why you listen, because we will deal with the tough stuff. If it's true, if we even think it's true, we'll deal with it. If we find out it's not, we'll come back and tell you it's not. But this was true. It was a criminal investigation by the fourth largest sheriff office in the nation, and I was graciously invited into the middle of it as a media spokesperson. I did have criminal law enforcement background, so they trusted me with that, and I appreciate that. But I was not the investigator. Mike Zullo did the lion's share, the bulk of the work on this. And, of course, he solicited the services of professionals all over the world to help him. But I was not a criminal investigator, but the mouthpiece. And right here on Freedom Friday, we dared to put before the world something that could have been very dangerous for us to do, but we did it. And nobody else would touch it. I mean, none of the big boys, Mike. You remember that? And your favorite clip we're getting ready to play, Mike. You know what it is. Why don't you introduce it?
You know, Carl, you sell yourself short here. I mean, before anybody even knew who Mike Zullo was, apart from his immediate circle of friends, you and I were doing the research and reporting on this birth certificate fraud in the White House. So don't sell yourself too short here. It's because of the initial groundwork laid by people like you, and yes, me a little bit also, that caused the uproar in Phoenix, in Maricopa County, that caused people to contact the sheriff's office and say, wait a minute, what is happening here? Are we about to elect a man for whom we have no clue where he was born? Is he eligible? We need to know this stuff, Sheriff. And that's why the sheriff stepped in and said, okay, I'm tired of getting all these phone calls. Can we just put this to rest already? Thank you, Carl Gallups, for your YouTube channel and pointing all this out to people. Now I can't get any sleep now, Mr. Gallups, because my people keep contacting me wanting this information. So now I got to go out and prove you wrong, Carl Gallups. And then months later, it's like, wait a minute. Carl Gallups is not wrong about this. We need to get some actual people in here that have this sort of background. And so enter Mike Zullo. And, you know, Dennis Montgomery is a serious player. Okay, like here's a guy who, it was just revealed this week that this man gets $10,000 a month to be a confidential informant. That's how serious a player this Dennis Montgomery is. And I kind of describe him as a paradox wrapped up in an enigma, because many people in the surveillance world, in the securities world, describe him as an opportunistic guy who just wants to attach himself to anything that might give him some notoriety. Other people in the security world say, no, this guy has information that has been beneficial and useful to us, and this hammer thing appears to perhaps maybe be one of them.
Yes.
And so Montgomery is being interviewed by Zullo and talks about how this program is they're able to use it to plant child porn or any illicit material on your computer, go in through backdoor channels onto your computer, plant child pornography on there, and then the authorities are notified and you get thrown in the hooskow for having stuff on your computer, and you're like, don't have a cauliflower clue how this got on my computer, right?
That's right. And they can back away and erase the URLs and or blame it on the Russians. He actually said that in an interview, and we don't have that clip today. Folks, just go through the archives of Freedom Friday. You just put the word Zullo in and just go through all those, and if you want to listen to them, you can catch up and hear them. They go way back for years, but you're right, Mike. And listen, thanks for the kind words you gave me. But truly, for several years, I was taking whatever I could get off the internet, et cetera, making phone calls and making contacts with people who seemed to be very deeply involved in it. And we were reporting on it, and I was giving my suspicions. And listen, I got to defend Mike Zullo again, even with Montgomery and the hammer. Mike never came out, to my knowledge, and made some statement of some categorical statement. This was used to overthrow elections. This was used to make the birth certificate. But he did come on and give scenarios and information that Montgomery was giving him and things they discovered about CIA URLs connected to the Department of Health in Hawaii, and how those were sent to a server in Jakarta and those were sent to a server back in D.C. and right during the time the birth certificate was getting ready to appear on the internet. I mean, how weird is that? But now Mike never came out and said, therefore, ipso facto, that proves the CIA manufactured the birth certificate. He's never said that. He was very professional about it and just saying, here's what we're uncovering. And he said, this is earth shattering. If this kind of software exists and if it's being used against the American people, and Montgomery says it is, and he's deeply involved in it, and Mike's NSA guy said, oh yeah, we know him, he's involved. Then now we've got an election that half of America at least believes that was a complete fraud and sham, with all these mail-in votes and votes being changed by the Dominion software. And then we hear people like Sidney Powell said, oh yeah, and the hammer was used too. And Dennis Montgomery, a CIA informer and FBI whistleblower, he's turned everybody on to this. And Dennis Montgomery, the hammer. And all the talking heads are going, oh, look what we discovered. But and I don't want any credit, and really neither does Mike Zullo, but we knew this years ago, and you guys called us all kinds of filth and trash, and we were never lying about it. We were telling the truth. So here we are. Did the hammer overturn this election? I don't have a clue. And I'm not going to make that charge. I just know that big, important legal people are talking about it as though it's a distinct possibility. Some are even saying it was used. I have not said that. But anyway, Mike, let's play this clip. This clip, Peter, how long is it? Minute and what? A minute what? Okay, 54 seconds? Oh, almost 2 minutes. Okay. It's a 2-minute clip. Let me set it up because it's a little grainy sounding. And the reason is because Mike was recording it with his cell phone years ago. And then it's been sent, it's going to come over the radio and then through whatever device you're listening to. So please forgive it. And you should make out 95% of it, but I'm going to kind of recap it, okay? But it's Mike Zullo talking to Dennis. And here's the context. The word hammer's never used, but that's what they're talking about. He's saying, so what could Mike's going to say? So basically, he's going to say, so what could you do with this? I mean, how could this affect anybody? How could this harm somebody? And Dennis is incredulous that he's asked that. He says, What do you mean? I can do this. I can do that. I can do anything. I can destroy a person with this. And then he gives examples. And it's bone chilling, folks. And then when you consider the suspicions we have about certain justices that may have been compromised over the years, certain congressmen, we see what's happened on Hunter Biden's laptop. Of course, that looks like something he just walked in the middle of. There's video of him. But these kinds of things against people, this espionage and spying and setting people up and compromising people, it's been going on a long time. And Zullo has been begging the world to listen to him, begging the world, because this could bring down the United States as we know it. That's Mike said that years ago, and he was called a nut. And here we are living the horror of it right now. And listen to what Dennis Montgomery said years ago. I saved the clip. I've got it. Peter, roll it.
I want to ask you a question before we go any further. I'm a government. You know what?
That's Mike Zullo.
Through harvesting to protect the country, yada, 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 we inadvertently collected blah, 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 blah. It's innocuous information. Nothing can really be done with it.
Social security number, credit card numbers? Credit card numbers?
What else could be done with this information? What could you do if you wanted to destroy the life of somebody with this information?
I'd go into their email accounts and I'd start uploading emails. I'd send pedophile picture links into their email accounts of pedophile kids. I'd say this guy's a pedophile. I would create a linked list. I'd upload into his email account all that. Then I'd download his email and say, look at all the websites this guy's been to. He's been to pedophile accounts.
How could you financially destroy somebody with this?
Oh, it's easy. I just go in his bank account, I go to the IRS. I take the information out. Let's say because I went into J. Edwards, Morgan Stanley. I go into his account, take all the information, send it over to the IRS, let him have it. Oh, really? He only claimed $87,000 this year. Well, here's all of his bank account records. Oh, by the way, they're offshore. I don't know if you knew that. There's an endless way I can do it. Right. There's so much data here. There's no way to protect yourself.
When you're doing this with Fox, you've got to try to convey that because the public doesn't understand.
I've already said it twice.
Okay.
And I've said it on the record.
Okay.
And what I've said on the record is it isn't innocuous information. The problem is, who has this?
That's right.
The guy walks out of the building, that's somebody's buddy, and he's over there charging bank accounts or going into people's email accounts because he's got the passwords to them. That's why people are told to change your passwords all the time and all that. I mean, it goes on. I mean, what does the government say? We weren't document harvesting? I just showed you a letter. You want your emails? They're on there. I'll start dumping emails to you. You know, it's without limit.
Yeah. Listen, folks, we're going to take a break, and we'll talk about it when we come back. And plus, Mike Shoesmith has a whole lot more to share with you. You're going to love it. See you in just 2 minutes.
Thank you for listening to Freedom Friday with Carl Gallups in the Oval Office of the Gulf Coast.
Welcome back to Freedom Friday with Carl Gallups. Sit down, buckle up, and hang on.
All right, folks, welcome this Friday afternoon, November the 13th. Now, for those of you on the Gulf Coast, you'll be listening to this again Sunday night by 1620 AM and 92.3 FM, plus the live streams there, plus, of course, on the radio, AM and FM. And you can listen to it podcast at carlgallups.com, carlgallups.com. And then there's another link. You can go to the archive. So this will be archived after about a week being up on carlgallups.com. You need to share this all over the world. You need to share it because regardless of what happens with this election, regardless of who they determine wins or loses, This is relevant. This is where we are right now in the United States. So, Mike Shoesmith, you heard that clip again. That's your favorite clip out of all of these because it just, it floors us to think about this. And so you heard the voice of Dennis Montgomery, folks. You heard him telling Mike Zullo how a life could be destroyed and compromised. And in the Obama administration, how you could swing a judge or a congressman or a bunch of judges, or how you could swing heads of law enforcement agencies, et cetera, et cetera. You ruin them, and then you show them what you've done, and there's nothing they can do about it. And then you say, now you're going to dance to my fiddle, buddy. So, Mike, what do you think? Let me hush and let you talk, because I know you have some insight and some ideas on this.
Well, see, herein lies the paradox, right? I mean, you have, it really does cause you to think, okay, so what about these Supreme Court justices that are flipping now? What do they have on those people? What have they pushed onto their computers? I mean, it just conjures up all these images of what, so like when you understand that this is possible and they may actually be doing this stuff, then certain things start to make sense, right?
Yes.
I mean, certain events, certain flips, certain decisions that have gone one way and then, all of a sudden they're going another way. Why did that happen? Why did certain Supreme Court justices all of a sudden start making decisions that were contrary to their original beliefs and teachings on this subject? Why is that happening? It really does make you wonder, doesn't it? But when it comes down to Dennis Montgomery, again, here's the paradox with him. Because even Zullo, this is a quote from Mike Zullo himself recently about Dennis Montgomery. This is why we have to take all this and kind of go, maybe we shouldn't rely on the hammer to as evidence for election fraud.
Right.
Because according to Mike Zullo, if you're using Montgomery as your source for, I'm quoting him now, as your source for information that only he claims to possess, you have no idea if any of what he's telling you is true, and he is not able to produce any verifiable forensic evidence that supports his claims, Zullo said. And he goes on to say, so he appeals to your moral sense of this must be the explanation. He tried to interject himself into the Flynn court fight and the Trump Tower wiretap, claiming the hammer did it with no evidence. He's the perfect poster child for let no crisis go to waste. If there's a way for him to attach himself to whatever is happening in the news, he will, unquote. This is from Mike Zullo. So I'm kind of likening that to that church in, where was that church where they say God hates fags and all this stuff? What was the name of that church?
Yeah,
that church,
I remember that. I can't remember the name, though.
Yeah, Westboro Baptist.
Yeah, that's it, Westboro Baptist Church.
I believe that church is a plant to make all the other churches look like moronic idiots, because these people, and there's a whole family of lawyers, by the way.
They could all be actors. They could all be crisis actors, hired and paid for.
Exactly. And there are many people that have sort of YouTube channels that make God out to be a monster and Christians out to be idiots, and I think those are plants. And I think that this Montgomery character could be a plant, like a wrench that gets thrown into the works here. So you have half a dozen genuine sources of fraud happening on American soil, perpetrated against the American public to basically usurp the office of the President of the United States. And then along comes this Dennis Montgomery guy, and he says, yeah, use my evidence too, right? So, in fact, his evidence proves to be completely bogus and unusable. I'm not saying it is. I'm saying it's possible.
I was going to say it hasn't been proven that, but some people suspect it. Go ahead.
And that his evidence is just enough poison to make the entire water distribution system undrinkable.
Yeah.
I guess is the best analogy I can come up with.
No, that's a good analogy. Yeah. No, excellent job. I agree with you. I think you've worded it just right, and I don't want to go back and restate it all, but I will just say this very quickly, that's the conundrum of all of this. Is the hammer real? Yes. Did Mike Zullo verify with other Intel employees in Washington, D.C., that the hammer was real and Dennis Montgomery's real and he really did operate it, work on it, maybe design it, had some part in it, whatever. And their answer was absolutely. So all of that is real. Now, from this point forward, because of the insinuations and allegations that Dennis is, sometimes opportunistic. And I'm not accusing him. I don't know. We're just saying what other people have said. Because of all of that, then can we say that that the hammer was used definitively in this election to steal votes. No, we can't. Now, maybe other people will. Maybe a judge will. Maybe President Trump will. He would know. We're hearing people claim that Trump knew and they watched it in real time. And I mean, I've seen all those videos, and that's cool if that happened, and that's conceivable. But I don't know that. I'm just bringing to our audience the fact that Mike Zullo wasn't crazy. I wasn't crazy.
Right.
Mike Zullo wasn't lying to anybody. I wasn't lying to anybody. This stuff is real, and it was going on, and it was being used. And Montgomery said it was used in the Florida election systems during Obama's tenure. Whether it was or not, who knows? But he says it was, and it's capable of it, apparently. So here we are now. And in the news, we're hearing all these talking heads. Yeah, the hammer. Yes, Dennis Montgomery. Yes, the hammer. Yes, we've uncovered this and we've discovered this. And, it's like, oh my gosh. I don't care who gets the credit, but don't trash me for 6 years and call me a liar. And then all of a sudden, you step forward and just don't even mention Mike Zullo's name. He's the one that brought it to the world, but they won't even talk about that. No, it's me. I look what we found. Look what we're doing. We're tracking this. And yes, we know about this, and we've known this for a long time. Well, if you did know it, where the heck did you hear it from? Freedom Friday.
Right.
And Mike Zullo.
And Mike Zullo is he's the perfect candidate for this kind of job, because it was his job to discredit the birthers.
Yes.
That was his job.
That's right.
Mike Zullo, if you want to find someone to discredit Dennis Montgomery, Mike Zullo has done it.
Yeah.
I mean, he has said he is completely unreliable. Don't believe this man. Now, he did also say that he is useful in some areas. In fact, useful to the point of paying him $10,000 a month as a CI. I mean, this guy he's a serious player in this thing.
Well,
but he's unreliable as far as what can we trust, what can't we trust, what side is he playing on? Is he a double agent? We just don't know this guy.
Right.
And Zullo saying we don't know this guy. But also, Zullo said this week in another interview, he said, look, the hammer is 12-year-old technology. It's a dinosaur now. Why would they use that technology now? It's a dinosaur.
Right.
It's 12 years old. So another reason why Zullo says, check it out. He's not saying don't check it out. He is saying use a healthy dose of skepticism when you're dealing with the hammer and Dennis Montgomery.
Yes.
That's what Mike Zullo is saying.
Yes. So, thank you for that context. And so all we're saying here, folks, is this is why you listen to Freedom Friday. Because if you'd been listening through those years, when all of this stuff came up, and you're hearing all these talking heads talk about this, none of this would have shaken you. None of this would have taken you by surprise. You would have been in the know for years. Again, these other guys, I mentioned them by name because it's true. Sean Hannity, Rush Limbaugh. Go down the line. Mark Levin, he's a super smart guy, constitutional lawyer. He's always talking about how brave he is. I hear him all the time. Sean Hannity, we're the only ones covering this. No, you guys didn't. You had the opportunity to have Mike Zullo on, and you wouldn't. You had the opportunity to talk about this and investigate it, and you wouldn't. You were either scared to death or you were compromised. And I'm just calling them out because Sheriff Arpaio, Mike Zullo, and I were livid with those guys back in the day. And I'm not saying that's how they feel now. I'm not speaking on their behalf. But back in the day, it was just crazy. They're sitting on top of this mound of information. If we could just get the media to speak about it, all of these big boys that called themselves big and bad and brave and patriots, and we're on the front line and nobody else is doing what we're doing. And here we are, Little Freedom Friday, going all over the world, shouting it, screaming it from the investigator that did the investigation and uncovered it. And nobody wanted to talk about it. Watch this, Mike, until now. Now they want to talk about it, and now they want to claim it. It's a crazy, nasty, filthy world, and we may be in the middle of a complete overturn of a presidency in the form of an electoral fraud coup. Those are my words. This is my opinion. Mike Shoesmith, tell people where they can get you, and then we got to get out of here.
PP Simmons at live.com, ppsimmons.com. We'll talk to you guys next week.
Okay, take care. Folks, PP Simmons at live.com. That's how you get a hold of Mike Mike Shoesmith and all the folks that work with him at PNN News and Ministry Network. But you're listening to Freedom Friday with Carl Gallups, the Oval Office of Gulf Coast Talk Radio, on this Friday afternoon and Sunday night. Hello, Sunday night audience, 1620 AM, 92.3 FM, ADX Communication Group. We'll be right back. Give us a few minutes.